Welcome everyone to Half History Will Travel. I am your host, the Wilder Historian, and today we will look at one of the most iconic geological features in the American landscape, the Cumberland Gap, and the first Civil War battle that took place there in March 1862. Brigadier General Felix Zollicoffer occupied and began fortifying the Cumberland Gap in the summer of 1861. The historic mountain pass acted as his base of operations as he made forays into the Bluegrass State, resulting in the battles of Barberville and Camp Wildcat in the fall of 1861. Zollicoffer came back to the Gap after his defeat at the hands of Albin Schopf at Wildcat. He stayed there only a short time before launching another invasion of Kentucky that ended in another defeat and his death at the Battle of Mill Springs. Zollicoffer left the Cumberland Gap and its small force under Colonel James Edward Rains, an attorney in Nashville, Tennessee before the war. Rains had a great rapport with his unit, the 11th Tennessee, and soon the entire garrison looked on him as a very capable commander, even though he was only 28 years old with no prior military experience. In February of 1862, Rains's garrison got tested by some Union cavalry, who drove in their pickets and only retreated when Confederate artillery opened up an intimidating volley at the Bluecoats. The Federal horsemen were sent on their mission by a veteran of the Battle of Mill Springs, Brigadier General Samuel P. Carter, a native of East Tennessee and the only man to hold a lieutenant commander position in the Navy and hold the rank of Brigadier General at the same time. Carter would play a prominent role in the Civil War in Appalachia. After his cavalry tested the entrenched enemy at the Gap, Carter decided to take his whole force, consisting of the 1st East Tennessee, 7th Kentucky, 16th Ohio, and 49th Indiana Infantry Regiments, 2 Parrott guns from the 9th Ohio Battery, and Colonel Mundy's 1st Kentucky Cavalry, to attack the Cumberland Gap. Rains, after being attacked in February, had desperately asked for more troops from his departmental commander at Knoxville. The department sent Colonel Daniel Ledbetter and ordered his entire command of 5 infantry units and 6 pieces of artillery to the Gap for its defense. Now, Rains had around 4,000 men, as opposed to Carter's 2,300. On March 21, 1862, Carter and his brigade marched south from the Cumberland Ford that lay 13 miles north of the Cumberland Gap. Skirmishing erupted between the two sides, and the Union troops once again pushed back the rebels to their fortifications. The next day opened with more sounds of war as a thick snow began falling all over the mountain slopes. Carter placed his 2 Parrott rifles on a ridge running parallel to the Cumberland Mountain on which the Confederates were fortified. The Harlan Road ran east of the Cumberland Gap behind Fort Rains, an artillery emplacement. That road provided an avenue of attack for the Federals, so Carter sent the 16th Ohio to occupy the Harlan Road and to make advances along it toward the fort and the 3rd Georgia Infantry Battalion and the 5th Georgia Infantry Regiment. The battery at Fort Rains and Carter's 2 rifled guns flung projectiles at one another, some hitting dangerously close to the rebels. The Ohioans pressured the Georgians along the road. At one point, the firefight became so hot that the 3rd and 5th Georgia had to scramble back to the confines of the fort, where the Buckeyes menaced the rebels with rifle fire. Rains stated, "The many balls are falling within our works, but our men are in good spirits." A few artillery shells were aimed at just the right angle that they passed through the Cumberland Gap itself and nearly hit Rains's living quarters. The Tennessean rode to each of the main artillery emplacements and trench lines, checking on his troops and offering them encouragement. The Ohioans, on many instances, took aim at the mounted figure, but were unable to land a hit. The Georgians again came out of the safety of the fort and engaged with the Federals, but this time they had help. The 29th North Carolina, perched atop the mountain at Fort Pitt, sent Company D down the steep slope to attack the flank of the Buckeyes. The stiff resistance put up by Rains's men signaled to Carter that he might need to probe the west side of the Gap. He chose the 49th Indiana to make a march to the Confederate left flank and approach from that side. But when the Hoosiers approached a knob sticking up on the northwest side of the Gap, an artillery battery, obscured by a dense undergrowth, belched forth a terrible hail of iron and lead. This quickly sent the 49th into a panic as they scrambled to safety. The last half of the day saw the two sides skirmish with one another, and as night drew near, Carter and his brigade slipped back to the Cumberland Ford under the cover of darkness. The casualties were small, less than 10 men on each side, because of the units attempting to fight on steep slopes where linear battle lines were not practical. This would be the largest engagement at the Gap between the North and the South, although there were more troops active around the Gap during the Confederate garrison's surrender the next year. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned some interesting details about one of the United States' most famous natural landmarks during the Civil War. If you get a chance to visit Cumberland Gap National Historical Park, you can tour the battery emplacement known as Fort Rains, although now it goes by the Union name, Fort McCook, and the Harlan Road is now a major trail in the park.
Historian, historian, where do you roam? Historian, historian, far, far from home. Have history will travel reads the card of a man, a professor with knowledge in the heartland. To educate the world is his mission. A professor of fortune is a man called historian. Historian.